Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. I hope you're doing well today. Today, I want to talk to you about how to let our kids fail so they can succeed. I think this can be even harder when we have kids with anxiety or OCD and they are struggling, or we have our own anxiety that makes it really hard to loosen those controls and let our kids stumble and fall. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about some of my own struggles with that and how I'm working through it so that we can give our kids their own experiences to have those successes and failures. But before we get started, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is the right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com, and I'll leave a link in the show notes. Also, if you didn't catch my episode last week about my new memoir coming out called Out of My Shell, which is going to be released September 19th, yikes, I am doing an offer that is a limited time offer until October 19th, that if you pre-order my book, Out of My Shell, and send us the receipt, you will get my $127 social anxiety course for free. Not too bad considering the book is a little over $19, or the Audible version is $19 and the course is $127. So you do the math. It makes like good sense if you're looking for social anxiety support. The social anxiety course is for kids, teens, and adults. The book is a memoir and it's appropriate, I would say, for teens and above. There's nothing in it that is inappropriate, except there is some content, some mild content about some suicide talk. And there is a scene where I discover my husband unresponsive. So those things may or may not be appropriate for your child or teen, depending on their age. It's not written for kids. It's an adult memoir. But I do feel like when I was writing it, I was thinking a teenager could easily read it. My 20-year-old read it. And so I don't think it's, as far as reading comprehension, it's not too hard. So check that out. You can find all the information about that at socialanxietyreality.com. And if you didn't know about my hidden Instagram account that is covering my own social anxiety, embarrassing, you can follow me at Social Anxiety Reality on Instagram. Okay, so let's talk about letting our kids fail so they can succeed. I am in the weeds with this right now with my 14-year-old, and it feels like a constant 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I want to talk about it and offer you some suggestions of what I'm trying to do to help. So we want to start with just understanding why it's important for kids to fail in order for them to succeed. Really, the way that we learn the most is through our experiences and our failures. We can't rob our kids the experience of failing because that's part of the learning process. And there's no shortcuts because you have to have your own experience doing things, testing limits, doing hard things, doing things that didn't work out for you to have that visceral experience of, I didn't like the way that felt, or, that was really upsetting and now I'm doing it this way. And so a lot of times we can rob our kids of this. And some of the reasons why this happens is, I made a little list because I'm a list maker. Some of us think we know better. And so we know that that's not going to work out for them. This happened to me with my oldest daughter, who's now 20, when she was in, I think, 7th or 8th grade. She'd get in the car and she'd tell me all these things that were going on socially. And I could clearly tell that her responses to her friends were not okay and that she was pushing them away. She was making herself a target. And so instead of letting her figure this out, I would swoop in and tell her exactly what to say and what to do. And the only thing that did was prevent her from telling me in the future what was going on. She didn't take my advice, and she had to learn it the hard way. And now we look back, and her 20-year-old self can say, yeah, I know I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have said that, or this is how I handle things. But she had to experience it herself. And so she overrode any of my suggestions because she needed to feel the bumps. So sometimes we know better, and we know it's not going to work out, or we know your anxiety can't handle that, or we know if I give you this much freedom, you're not going to know what to do with it. But they have to experience it themselves. The other thing is we may think that they can't handle it. And so we might think, you can't do that because your anxiety or OCD is not going to be able to handle that. Or if I say that you can monitor your own stuff, you're not going to how to monitor it. You're going to, be online forever, or you're going to eat so much, or you're going to do whatever it is. They can't handle the freedom that we're giving them. Another one might be we don't want the fallout. And so I don't want you to go do that thing because I know your anxiety or OCD can't handle it. And I don't want to be the one that's called and I have to come and pick you up. And now you're like 2 steps behind in your journey with anxiety or OCD because you did something that was way too hard. Or the fallout of giving them freedom around just a typical thing. Like, I'm not going to micromanage what you eat, but now all you're doing is eating junk food. So we don't want to deal with the fallout of now you're unhealthy or now you're too tired because you stayed up all night. The last one I thought of is it triggers our own anxiety. Like, I don't want to see my kids fail. I don't want them to make a fool of themselves. I don't want them to be embarrassed. I don't want them to feel pain. I don't want them to feel shame. I don't want them to feel panic. I don't want them to feel embarrassed. And so I want to prevent that. And so I don't want them to do something that might be too risky and they might fail. So I'm covering, if you can tell, I'm covering both anxiety and OCD specific issues, but I'm also sprinkling in general parenting struggles with giving our kids a little bit more space to fail so that they can succeed. Because I feel like it's a two-parter. I feel like it's something we have to navigate on both levels. And I think when our kids have so many struggles already, we are less likely to give them a little bit of freedom to fail in other arenas as well. But this is the thing. When we don't do this, some things happen that are not positive. When we don't allow them to fail in order to succeed, they learn the hard way when we aren't there to catch them. And so I've seen this in my practice a lot, and I've seen it with now my older daughter who's 20, the people that she used to hang out with. When you have parents that are catching and swooping in, and this actually was with my first husband too and his family, like always rescued, never hit the floor, never hit the ground, always cocooned, always rescued, always a safety net. And so you never feel the full brunt, the full impact of any mistake or any error or any situation because someone's swooping in and saving you. And I've seen this in a positive and a negative way, right? People, like parents who want to coddle their kids to the point where they don't want them to have these growing pains. And I've seen it where parents are too strict because they're so anxious about what if this happens or what if that happens, and they over micromanage their child and they don't kind of expand when it's developmentally appropriate as they're getting older. Those kids really rebel because they've been contained for so long. They just rebel and they go off the deep end sometimes because they're so excited about bursting out of that control that they don't know how to manage all that freedom that they get once they hit college. And I've seen that happen with a lot of people. But the other thing, when we coddle and we're not letting them hit the ground, is they don't know how to handle things. And so they have to learn the hard way when they grow up and they're on their own, but they don't have any skills. And so sometimes those kids as adults give up before they even start. Or we might see this in our teenagers when we've done this for too long, that they give up before they give up before they even start because they can't handle challenges. They have no resilience because when the going got hard, the parent came in and took over and made it easy for them and didn't give them time to fail or time to build their muscles. And so none of us do this on purpose, but it's something to think about. The other thing that I think is a bad side effect of us not letting our kids fail is they learn to be dependent on others. They're always looking for someone to save them. They're waiting for someone to swoop in. And when it's not you, it might be a friend or a teacher, or as they grow up, a partner, a roommate. They're always the victim. It's always like, I can't do this. Somebody needs to help me. And I've seen this in relatives that I've known that are like 70, 80 years old. And they're kind of like, I can't book this for myself. Can you book it? I can't do this for myself. Can you do this? And you're like, how did you function for 70 years without someone doing things for you? So we want our kids to feel empowered. We want ourselves to feel empowered. And part of that is experiencing failure, which I know is so hard. And so I'm talking about two areas, like I said, anxiety and OCD. Sometimes we're afraid for them to do things because we may think that they're not going to be able to actually do it. And I know for myself that happens a lot, where my kids will want to sign up for something, or here, I'll give you an example. Both my kids in the previous years have wanted speaking parts in the band performance, which for me, it's already really hard for my social anxiety to go and sit during band concerts. And maybe that seems really weird to you, but if you have social anxiety, you probably get it. Just sitting there without knowing anybody, I'm not part of any mom groups, and I feel really awkward, and everyone's talking and stuff. And it like highlights my loneliness. And my husband used to always go and sit with me. And so I feel really sad and uncomfortable during those things. And so I'm already in a pretty uncomfortable place. And then if my child got up there and messed up and had a panic or had panic or had an anxiety attack in front of everybody, and I had to like get out of my seat and go help them, I mean, mortifying is not even the word. So when they say I got a speaking part, I'm like, why? Why would you do that to you? I mean, me, you. They've always done well. It's always been okay. One time my son did something a bit weird. He did like an inside joke to the band, and that made me feel really awkward because nobody understood it in the audience. And I'm like, why did you do that? So awkward. But I'm so worried that, they both have social anxiety. And I know that if they got up there and something triggered them, they wouldn't be able to handle it. But is it for me to swoop in and say, you need to go talk to the band teacher and not have a speaking part? That's not okay. I don't want you to be stressed on the day that you have to speak. No, they already said they want to do it. I have to back off. We're also talking about just freedom in general, because some of us are anxious and are nervous about giving our kids more freedom. And I know I am so guilty of this. And I find that when I talk to other parents that I'm friends with, I do have some friends, yay. But when I talk to them, it's funny because they have different fears. And it's funny because like some of us are flexible on different things. Like I have friends who are really concerned about what their kids eat. And I have friends that are really concerned about what their kids do on electronics. And I have some friends, and I am, worried about their safety and like, them getting kidnapped or molested. I don't really care as much about what they eat or technology as much. And they don't care as much about the freedoms of them walking around and doing stuff. And it's funny because it's just different. We all have our own fears, but in general, giving them some more freedom is really helpful. And so like letting them walk to their friend's house if there's an age where that can be appropriate. And the last category is like more autonomy. And so do we give them the freedom to fail in regulating their own food, regulating their own time on their devices, regulating their own bedtime? Now, that might freak you out. You're like, what is she talking about? We're going to discuss it. And I'm going to talk about how we do this right after the break.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers. And so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it. So it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com. Welcome back. Okay, so I probably freaked you out with my last comment there, but I want to talk to you in general and give you some concrete skills on how do we let our kids fail so they can succeed. Sometimes we think they're going to fail with anxiety or OCD, and they don't, and they prove us wrong. And so this doesn't mean, when we're talking about anxiety or OCD, this doesn't mean let's, force them to do something that they are anxious or uncomfortable to do and let them fail at it. And then they're going to feel like they can succeed. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the times where they are willing to do something. They want to do something brave, or they want to sleep over at their friend's house, even though they can't even sleep, alone in their own bed. Or they want to go to sleepaway camp and they can't even sleep over at their friend's house for one night, or they want to eat sushi and they can't even eat regular food. I don't know. They want to do something, but it's incongruent with their ability with anxiety or OCD to do those things. And some of us, myself included, sweep in prematurely and say, you know what, maybe next year, or I don't think so because this, and this. And sometimes we rob them the opportunity because we're worried they're going to fail when actually they can succeed. Or they might make it halfway. Maybe they can't even sleep in their own bed, but they want to sleep over at their friend's house. And yes, maybe you have to go pick them up at midnight, but then the next time you pick them up at 2, and the next time you pick them up at 4, and the next time they make it the whole night. That's scaffolding. That's exposure. That's processing failure and turning it into success over time. That's hard. That's annoying, and it's sleep depriving. But it is part of the process, and it is important that you highlight, wow, you were really brave. And you know what? You lasted until 1 o'clock this morning. That's better than last time. Maybe next time you can go to 3 o'clock. That is motivating in small baby steps. And a lot of times we don't allow our kids to have those opportunities because we see it as a failure. We see it as a win or a failure, and we don't want them to feel failure. I'll give you an example. This happened yesterday or the day before. My daughter this is a little bit of an example. I feel like part of letting our kids do something they might fail at around anxiety or OCD is having a contingency plan. And so having a contingency plan is privately in your head, you have a realistic view of, I may have to go pick up my kid at 2 a.m, right? So maybe you keep your phone not on vibrate, you keep it on, and you go to bed early because you're aware that you might have to get up early, right? So you have a contingency plan. Or you don't go away the weekend that your kid's at sleepaway camp because you know you might get a phone call and you don't want to be in another country. You need to go pick them up. So the other day, my daughter had a get together with her friends, like a going back to school get together. And one of her triggers right now is she gets anxiety attacks when she's around her friends, which is so sad. And so if you add food to the mix, it's 10 times worse. And so she was getting a little revved up about going. She was excited. She's so social, but she was excited. And the night before, she was like, oh, I'm feeling sick. I'm feeling worried. And so the next morning, she had archery. She does archery. It's very cool. She's very good at it. So she had archery class. And then she said, I want to go directly from archery to my friends. And in my mind, I was like, don't you want to come back first and kind of like anchor yourself and regroup and get yourself together before you go? Because you know that you might be anxious and, you know, she might feel sick. She might need some medicine because she gets so spun up in a panic that sometimes she needs to take like she takes hydroxyzine to like calm her down, which is an antihistamine. And so she's like, no, I just want to go right after archery because, you know, it starts at 12 and archery will be done at 12. And I was like, it's true. But I was like, okay, like I want to follow her lead, but I grabbed the hydroxyzine and I put it in my purse just in case I had a contingency plan. So if she started to like have a problem, I could say, oh, here, do you want to take your medicine before you go? And she wouldn't have to go back home. So letting our kids do something where they might fail with anxiety or OCD doesn't mean that we don't have contingency plans or we're not in the wings ready to help them and support them, but we're allowing them to walk out on the stage alone and we're right there in the wings. When it comes to other areas, let's talk about some other parenting areas. When we're talking about freedom, so it doesn't mean that there's not like an invisible safety net with freedom. The way that I view parenting, and everyone's different, so you do you, but I feel like we have to give them a little bit of freedom and autonomy. And then when they show that they are not capable of that, then we have to bring it back in. And I feel like a lot of parents don't play this game frequently enough because I feel like it should be almost like a weekly thing. And I'll explain when I'm talking about my son. Oh my gosh. So with my daughter, right, she wants autonomy. She's 12 and a half and she has friends in the neighborhood. She wants to walk over to her friend's house. She might want to go out with her friends and the parent's going to take them somewhere. And we live in a nice neighborhood, but it's still a major city and bad things happen in major cities. We have one neighbor and I'm pretty sure it's a drug house, and which is so weird because we do live in a really nice neighborhood, but there is this one house on my block that they clearly look like they're doing some illegal activities. It's like 5 to 10 people living there, and I think there's sexual stuff going on and there's drugs. And so it makes me nervous because even though we live in a nice neighborhood, there's traffic coming on our street that's not the best, which is really unfortunate. I think that house is rented and, well, I know it's rented and I'm hoping maybe we'll get a new tenant one day, but they've been there for a while. So I get nervous letting her walk around. So, but she's 12 and a half and all of her other friends walk around and they ride their bikes and she's 12 and a half. So I have Life 360. And so I can give her freedom and also give myself something that makes me feel comfortable about. So she has a phone. I make her wear like a little fanny pack and she always has to have her phone on her. And I can track her and I can see like, okay, she's over the hill now or she's at her friend's house. So I do like Life 360 because of just that ability to see where she is. And I can actually see if she's walking, riding a bike, or she's in a car. One time I got really freaked out because she was riding her bike, but she was going fast down a hill. And this is kind of the very beginning when I was looking at Life 360. And because she was speeding down the hill, it registered as a car. So I pull her up and I see that she's in a car and I freak out. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's in a car. Like she's been kidnapped. Obviously one of my core fears. And then I realized, oh wait, I know exactly where she is. And that's a hill. And then it turned into a bike as soon as she was going a regular speed. So obviously you can sense my paranoia. A lot of people don't have that paranoia. And so maybe you don't even want Life 360, but having some parental tools is not a bad thing, but they still perceive their freedom. They still experience their freedom. Now, if she went where she wasn't supposed to go, or she didn't come back when she was supposed to come back, then we might pull those freedoms back, right? And we might tighten it up again. The other thing is regulating their own food, their own devices, their own bedtime. As our kids get older, they have to learn from their mistakes. And I've seen parents have these really strict rules all the way up until the child's like 17, 18 years old. And they leave the nest and they go to college or they go to their own apartment, and they don't know how to eat well. They don't know how to get off their devices. They don't know how to sleep because they never learned how to self-regulate when they were at home because the parent put their own restraints on it. And so, or never try to restrain it at all. I feel like this is actually could go both ways, right? Like it's teaching them. And so I know that I'm trying to experience that. I'm trying to do that with my 14-year-old as he gets older. I'm not so much about regulating my kids' food intake. And part of that was because my oldest had sensory processing disorder and mainly a lot of oral stuff and failure to thrive. And so anything we can get in her mouth was successful. And then my son has ARFID and restrictive eating. And so for a very long time, we just needed to get calories in him any way possible. And then my youngest has celiac, and so she's so restricted already without being able to eat gluten that I didn't nitpick what she ate. And then my son started to gain a lot of weight because he was put on medication to gain weight with ARFID, and now he has plenty of weight. He could actually lose a little bit of weight, and I became more nitpicky with him because he did not know how to regulate his eating. He would eat like a zillion Takis per day, and it was starting to really rip up his stomach because they were spicy. So now I've had to go in and be like, I'm not buying Takis anymore. And you can have this candy or this dessert, but what are your proteins? What have you eaten so far? So now he's had all that freedom, and I've had to swoop in and now take some of that freedom away. And I really feel like when you're getting into the teen mode, with when we're talking about technology and diet and sleep, it is literally like, here's your freedom. You lost that freedom. Here's your freedom. Oh, you lost that freedom. And I have this thing where I'm talking to my son recently, and I'm like, if I give you an inch and you take a mile, you lose the inch. And that's a daily thing where I'll give you an example. I'll be like, it's the summer right now. And I'll be like, he was able to have all of his stuff, his technology and stuff around the house. And then I discovered some things, and I was like, now all like your computer, your iPad, your phone, all of that needs to come into my bedroom at night, so that I know it's off. Now you don't have to actually physically do that. I mean, there's software programs where you can turn things off. I just don't want it to be, actually, I don't know. It was kind of complicated to set up the computer one. I was just working with these things. And so it's just easier for me to just take it all. And it's also kind of a good visual thing for him to see, like, I'm taking it all and I'm putting it in my room at night so that you can't use it. And it's not even tempting you. It's not there. But sometimes I'm tired and I go to bed before him and I'm like, just bring it all downstairs. And then it doesn't happen. And then I do have parental controls that I can see activity. So I'm using Bark. Have you heard of Bark? Bark is actually kind of complicated, I think, to put on all the devices. But it actually was helpful. There's a router option, Bark Home, and you can attach it to the router, and then it can like just pick up whatever's on the router. But then I wound up also getting Aurora. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's AURA, which is also similar to Bark, but that was much easier to put on their iPhone and iPad. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, now I have 2 of these things. Plus I've got Microsoft Family, what is that called? Family Safety. So I have 3 things, but I can give them a little bit of freedom, and I can see where they're going, what they're doing online. I can turn all the devices off at a certain time instead of getting into a push and pull. But ultimately, I want my kids to be able to tell when they need to get off their own devices, or be able to tell when they need sleep and want to go to bed. But we're not there yet. I am, and it's funny because I am with my 12-year-old. She gets tired and she says, I want to go to bed. She doesn't need a bedtime. she will generally say she wants to go to bed between 9:30. She's tired. She reads her body. So that freedom with her can be a little bit more, and it doesn't depend on age. It depends on like just where they're at, because she can kind of tell where she's at. Where my 14-year-old would stay up literally all night. He has ADHD, and I think he literally would not go to bed unless I said, you need to go to bed by this time. So giving them some autonomy, and then for us, especially with the 14-year-old right now, it's a every day, every week assessment. It's like, okay, I told you to go to bed at 10:30 because I went to bed at 10, and I gave you an inch to bring your own devices down at that time because I was tired, and you didn't go to bed until 2 a.m. or 3 a.m, which I can see because I have all these parental controls on all of your stuff. And so now you need to go to bed at 10 o'clock when I go to bed at 10 o'clock because I gave you an inch and you took a mile. And then a week later, it'll be like, okay, I'm going to give you that inch again, and let's see how that goes. That's, I think, where parents often don't do that, is we don't go back and give them the inch again. We're kind of like, nope, you're done. And it's this back and forth until they develop their own ability to regulate. And that can be a long journey. I think it's going to be a long journey for me with this one, but that's normal. That's just parenting. It's not like, oh, I gave you this freedom, or I gave you this privilege and you abused it, and so now you don't have that anymore. No, we have to just keep giving it back to them over time. Maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, we have to just keep giving it back to them and see what they do with it. I allowed you to make food choices, and I noticed that you ate 5 bags of chips. And that probably made you feel pretty bad. And so it seems like now I'm going to have to kind of go back. I gave you an inch, you took a mile. Now we have to go back, and I have to kind of tell you what you can and cannot eat because you ate excessively. That's just too much. So it can be really hard, but I think letting our kids fail so they can succeed is really important. I noticed this with my 20-year-old. She's like the first one that's out of the house, and she's doing really well. I feel like she's able to make her own decisions and able to handle difficult things that happen to her. I think her resiliency is better, and I feel like she's developed her own healthy habits because she had to learn those, and she was given the autonomy to learn those when she was in high school, compared to some of her friends, which they weren't given that freedom, and then they kind of were rebelling in high school and sneaking around. So just some things to think about, some interesting things to think about. I hope that you found this helpful. If you are enjoying my podcast, don't forget to hit a star and rate the show. I greatly appreciate that. And I'll be back on Tuesday with a new topic. Don't forget to find the sparkle in everything you do. And also don't forget that my offer, if you're dealing with social anxiety or have a loved one with social anxiety, that my offer for you to get my social anxiety course, my $127 course for free, if you pre-order my memoir. I always forget the name of my memoir. Is that bad? It is bad. Out of My Shell, Overcoming Social Anxiety from Childhood to Adulthood. One day that will stick in my head. You can go to socialanxietyreality.com, pre-order the book for $19 and change, and get my $127 social anxiety course for free. You just have to email us the receipt of your Amazon book or Audible book, and we will give you a coupon code for you to access that course for a lifetime for free. This offer does end October 19th, 2024. Also follow me at Social Anxiety Reality on Instagram. It's an account I never tell you about because it's me being vulnerable about my social anxiety. So if that is interesting to you, if you like to listen to another person's torment, feel free to check my Instagram out. Actually, it's not about my torment, but it might help you understand your loved one's social anxiety, or maybe you have social anxiety, and it'll help validate and normalize your experience. Follow me at Social Anxiety Reality, or go to the website socialanxietyreality.com for that offer. And I will see you next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.